Welcome everyone to MPA University's Hybrid Masterclass. Our Hybrid Masterclass will be covering the hottest topics in hybrid events over the next 6 weeks. My name is Lauren Huffman. I'm the Director of Marketing Operations over at MeetingPlay plus Eventry. Each session will bring in speakers with expert experience in the subject matter, and attendees will have the opportunity to earn up to 6 CMP credits throughout the course. We are so excited to kick off the series with setting hybrid goals and building event timelines. Today's session will be taught by Meredith Schultz and Lauren Peary. Meredith serves as the Chief Experience Officer at Miller Tanner Associates, overseeing all facets of delivering one-of-a-kind global experiences for hundreds of clients. Her extensive knowledge in the events industry spans over 2 decades, with prior clients including Goldman Sachs, Bloomberg, the IOC, and M&Ms. Charged with creating vision, strategy, and process, Meredith is intuitively drawn to all things unique and strives to be a meaningful disruptor in the event industry, one event at a time. Lauren has been an account manager with MeetingPlay since 2017 and has overseen many of our largest events to date. She graduated from Millersville University in 2012 with a bachelor's in psychology and a minor in criminology. Lauren has been involved in event planning since 2013 and was a lead for American Jail Association's trade show exhibitors in their annual conference from 2013 to 2016. She truly enjoys how no day in the event industry is the same. Every event is unique and loves helping planners to bring their vision to life with MeetingPlay plus Eventry's innovative technology. Please join me in welcoming Lauren and Meredith as we get started on today's session.
Hello.
Hi, Lauren. Hi, Lauren. Thanks for being here, Lauren, good to see you.
Good to see you. Happy to be here.
Happy to be here as well. Well, I have started chatting with our amazing audience already, so I hope you all are engaged there in our chat features as well. Mm-hmm. Lauren and I are really excited to be here with you today to kickstart MPA. And I just want to sort of set the tone a little bit. I started chatting with some of the attendees here, and also if you thought you were coming here to have death by PowerPoint with Lauren and I, you may want to jump from the webinar because we're not here for that. I think our goal for Lauren and I is to have kind of a virtual conversation, albeit a little bit of an unfair one because we have the voice and you just have your fingertips, but we're great readers. And so we'll be looking at the engagement panel and making sure that we're connecting with you. We want you to chat in. We'll be asking lots of questions of you, sharing. And our goal here is to provide a lot of opinions and guidance and some thought leadership for you to build off of in this time period. More around crafting the idea of how we approach timelines and budgeting and less about the bullet points for that. So, Lauren, is there anything else you want to add for our sort of intentions for today?
No, that is perfect. Keep the chats coming. We want this to be engaging for all of you, and we want to make sure that we're delivering what's, most beneficial for you all here today. So looking forward to just working through it all together.
Amazing. Well, we're going to take a trip down memory lane for me first, and do a little engagement with you. So my very first hybrid event was in 2002. 20 years ago. The year was 2002, and it was, you can see here on your screen, a screenshot of M&M's doing their first, and I want you to hear that word, first global campaign. Okay, in 2002, they launched their first global campaign, and it was to choose the new color for the M&M's bag. And so you had a choice between pink, purple, and aqua. And it was my very first event. And so Fred Willard was the MC. So in our engagement panel, I'd love for you all to have a guess on something. There were 2 performers at that webcast, as we called it in those days. And there was 1 female and 1 male. And for whomever can guess who that was without Googling it, put your guesses in the chats as to who the 2 female and male performers were at that event where Fred Willard was the MC and we were announcing the very first global campaign for M&M's, their new color webcast. So it was you're all guessing, it was my very first event. It was in New York City at the Met Pavilion. I had the esteemed jobs of handing out radios and wiping down glass tables, which was a very thankless job on that event, as I soon learned, because glass does not stay clean for very long. So I'm curious to see what's come in. We have any guesses coming in for our performers? We'll give another minute. Lauren, any guesses from you? I don't think I shared with you who the performers were.
I honestly have no clue. I think you did tell me at least one of them, but
Okay.
to be honest, I don't even know where I would begin to guess. I'm eager to see.
Okay. Well, I'm going to reveal the male performer, which was Wyclef Jean was the male performer for this particular event. And for this event as well, the female performer was Aaliyah.
Okay.
Which was amazing. So lots of stories for that event, but all this to say, and if anyone got close or guesses, we'll send prizes at the end. All that to say, we have actually been doing hybrid events for a very long time. We just haven't been calling it that. So I don't want to go into sort of a debate or a conversation on what constitutes hybrid, but I think it's important to recognize that as event professionals, we've been doing this for a while. And we've just been calling it other things. So I'm curious, Lauren, we're going to poll the audience now, wondering for this audience, prior to COVID start, and we'll make COVID start January of 2020, had you or your team executed hybrid events? So we'll launch that poll now for you. And then Lauren, while they're answering, I'm just curious, I'm curious when your first hybrid event is. Do you remember?
So initially, when you say when was your first hybrid event, I want to say 2021, right? When all this hybrid was really coming to life. But with what you just outlined, it makes me want to kind of sift through my brain a little bit and think, have I done hybrid before? We labeled it as hybrid? Probably. So I would have to kind of revisit that. So I guess I'm a little bit of C in this poll as not sure. Maybe I have. I'd really have to think about it because, like you've mentioned, we're labeling it hybrid now, but we've really been doing it for a while. And we're seeing a lot of results coming in here. The majority is no, but we do have a good mix of yes as well. So.
Okay, well, fantastic. Well, that's good to know. So we'll cater our discussion around that. It looks like then a lot of people got started in hybrid after COVID struck, but either way, I'm curious. And yes, Alan, I see RIP Aaliyah. Absolutely. I feel very lucky that I got to see her in one of her final performances before she passed. So yes, thank you for calling that out as well. Would love for you all to chat into the engagement tool what struggles you're having currently with budget, what struggles you're having with timeline. So Lauren and I can help craft some of what we're sharing around maybe challenges you're facing right now. So without further ado, let's get to the first critical step. And Lauren, I think we're in agreement on this, which is that the most important step that you can do before you do anything is establish your budget. Correct. Even before timeline, yes.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm a big timeline person, and we will talk through that as well here today, but budget is definitely step one. Even before you really dive into your goals and how you're executing, right, and everything that you're including for the event, you need to know the number that you're working from to be able to determine your path forward. So definitely, step one.
Exactly, and I think part of that is really just around this idea, and maybe you all had this experience as well. Early on in the pandemic, we would get on these calls and do traditional, what I call ideation with our client base. Oh, we want this, we want this. We were taking these large face-to-face experiences and we were trying to translate them and help our clients translate them into full virtual landscapes, right? And then we get to the very end and we present a budget, which was 6 figures because they had all these grand ideas, and they'd come back and say, oh, well, we reallocated our face-to-face budget over here, 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 and here. We actually only reserved $5,000 for this event. It's like, okay, well, there you can do a Zoom. That's a very basic functionality that you're coming to. So budget is the true roadmap for what can be done. And I think this is a real shift in the industry. I think oftentimes our clients come to us and say, tell us what the cost is. And a lot of times we're trying to reverse that conversation now and say, we're a trusted partner, right? We're going to appropriately price our services because we recognize that that's part of our role in the industry. And what we need to hear from you is what your budget is, so we can then begin to help you prioritize and allocate those funds in the right way.
Yes.
Wondering if this audience as well is having success with that, and if having any pushback from it. I have there's already something in here from Deborah. So much of hybrid is based on the technology used, and that is currently all over the map. How do we build a sound budget when the unknown is so vast? That is a great question. And I think that highlights exactly why we're suggesting you start with budget, right? So in the scenario that you have $5,000, you're not going to be able to lift a huge event platform for that client, right? You're going to have to guide them into a simplified webinar scenario.
Yes.
But knowing, yes, agreed, Lauren?
Yes.
Yes, and so Deborah, that is exactly the thing. You have to establish what their budgets are so that you can select the appropriate technology and appropriate features within the technology for them.
Yep, that is definitely key. So again, knowing your budget or your number first, and then being able to evaluate what features you can use. And this will all trickle into what we're planning to talk about here today, Meredith. But, you know, goals, what you're prioritizing, what is most important for you to deliver to your audience and how, right? So you need to know that number and then see how you can best manage that.
Exactly. Ray is agreeing with us. Yes, starting with budget is extremely important to start with. And then Jamie, I see that you're kind of highlighting something that does dovetail into the budget conversation, which is planning 2 events in parallel, in the in-person and virtual aspects. So yes, strongly suggest when you're in the budgeting phase to maybe look at a variety of budget configurations with the client and to set expectations. So let's use the $5,000 scenario, right? If the client truly has only $5,000, then you're saying you're never going to pivot into face-to-face or hybrid, right? There's not enough money. And at any sort of price point above that $5,000, you may be having that conversation. I think this is, Lauren, you were just starting to get there, and this comment and what you were sharing kind of leads us into our next sort of item to discuss here, which is what are the important conversations to be having. And so I'll just share with you all, I think we traditionally started with goals and budget, but I think there's a middle step now that Lauren and I have been talking a lot about, which is the step of education. And it's an incredibly important conversation for you to be having with your clients. Lauren, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to share with regards to education and things that you've been seeing from your end operationally.
I mean, I think that is, definitely key in terms of, your number. Now you need to educate yourself on what features are available, what functionality is available, right? There are a lot of things in the industry, so it's really good to kind of try and wrap your arms around it. Some of you said you did not do a hybrid event before, right? So you're dipping your toes into this. Reach out to your vendor partners and really try to understand what's available to you. And then for those of you who have done it, I'm sure it's taken a turn, right? Hybrid's a little bit different now, even though we've been doing it. So once you know that number, to really try and understand the features that you have, then that will kind of help drive your goals almost, right? So you have an idea of what your goals are perhaps, but determining how they will be achieved, getting that education with what you can offer is crucial.
Absolutely. And I think there's a high level of terminology that needs to be reviewed and looked at as well with your clients. I think, and even earlier in the chat stream, people were making comments about what the terminology used to be 20 years ago. And I said like webcast for the M&M's event, right? There's so much terminology being thrown around right now in the industry, not only by event professionals, but by the client. So really suggesting in these early education and goal setting stages that you go through definitions with your clients of what you mean when you're saying, for example, a webcast or a webinar. Do they even really understand what that means? You know, for us in the industry, we understand webinar to be a one-way communication, right?
Mm-hmm.
Two speakers or one speaker or a small group of speakers going out to a larger group. Not all clients understand that. I had even just yesterday a very high-level discussion around just the product of Zoom because the term Zoom was being thrown around. And I said, wait, we have to pause for a second because there are two products. There's Zoom meeting and there's Zoom webinar.
Mm-hmm.
And you're mixing, crossing features between the two platforms. And so we have to make sure that when we go in, we're using the right vocabulary and educating our clients so that when we are doing that goal setting that you're talking about, Lauren, after we've had this budget established, that we're all using the same vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
I know some of the pain points of this this past 2 years for many event professionals has been, especially from the sales to operational cycle, oh, the client in the sales cycle thought the term meant this, got into operations, understood it to mean something else, and then had disappointment, right, around that. Seen some of that as well?
Yeah. So what we like to do, you know, during the sales process, when you're outlining goals and going through budget and kind of everything that we've talked through thus far, a big component that I'm thinking of just in terms of our platform is session types, right? So we have a variety of different types, similar to what you were just saying with Zoom. There's 2 different types, right? So we like to outline those, but also like to demonstrate what that is so that they can put a visual to it as well, right? Because we're kind of all learning here. So we, for our platform, are the subject matter expert at our platform, right? So we're able to enlighten you with what that entails and kind of explain it to you and have that engaging conversation, answer questions. And some of those discussions then lead into the goal setting, right? And how you will utilize those for your meeting. So it kind of all works in tandem, but yes, completely defining what these terms are meaning so that everyone is on the same page is great, especially as we're diving into this hybrid world together.
Yes, I'm laughing. Peggy in the chat says online and virtual words we have to explain a lot, right? We're down to the basics on explanation. I think there are a couple of other good comments in the chat here around even Ray sharing, have to explain exactly what hybrid is because everyone has a different idea of what hybrid is. And Ray, that's such a great point as well. What Lauren and I discussed in prep for this is even just the varying levels of hybrid, right? So we could have a simple hybrid, which is just it could just be an audio and slide stream out to an audience, right? That's a simple hybrid element that can be added to a face-to-face event, right? So what the virtual audience is getting is just a simple audio and slide feed. And then there may be something more standard that you're adding into this hybrid complexity, which is audio and video of the speakers potentially with the slides going out to your virtual audience. And then last but not least, there's the advanced idea of a hybrid event, which would be two-way communication. So audio, video, and slides out to an audience that may be virtual, and then audio, video, and slides in from that virtual audience. And that could be both virtual speakers and or literally having breakouts that have your virtual audience on camera to mirror what's happening in your face-to-face scenario. So again, in those 3 different scenarios around what a hybrid event could look like for that virtual audience with the face-to-face, you have very distinct budget tiers that you're going to begin to see. And so I see a little bit in the chat going on about, it's a little bit of like, you're chasing your tail because you need to know how much budget you're working with in order for your vendors to be able to tell you what you want to do. And I think that's why that budgeting step is so key to begin with, because it doesn't lead you down a path during the planning where you're constantly chasing your tail. You can have some of the hard conversations with the client that says, okay, you've established that you have $20,000. Here's what's on the table for that, and here's what's not on the table for that. If you have $10,000 extra dollars, here's what we can add. If you have $20,000, here's what can be added, and so on and so forth. So you can really create this budget with educational tiers for the client, so they make very informed decisions as you're moving through, and it doesn't feel so much like you are chasing your tail during the planning process.
Definitely. I see some comments in here as well. So Ray is bringing up that audience engagement from the virtual platform may be a good component, right? So sort of thinking towards the standard aspect, maybe that middle level, right? Where we have something similar to what we have set up here today. We are presenting and it's being streamed into the platform. So virtual audience is able to chat and ask questions, right? But in terms of putting that in a hybrid perspective, you can think about your folks on site could be sitting in, the session that is streaming, okay? And they have their app on their phone, and they are also able to chat and ask questions directly. So it allows for engagement from both of your audiences. And it's also nice because your audience together get to network a little bit, right? They can reply to each other and whatnot. So there are options, right, to kind of blend the hybrid audiences together, but you need to think through, obviously, the goals of what's more important in doing that and how you plan to achieve that. Sometimes it's not all agenda content based, right? There are other things involved in terms of engagement and networking and whatnot, gamification. So there's a lot that you can uncover, but depending on the budget, maybe you need to keep it a little bit more simple. And the way of just tying those two audiences together is straightforward with just chat and Q&A, right? So that you're able to achieve some form of hybrid.
Absolutely. There's a great comment from Nancy in our chat. She says, it's really helpful to approach conversations with clients as if you're building a software tool. Absolutely. Fantastic comment. What's absolutely necessary? What would be nice to have? And what do you not care about? What do you want participants to be able to do, see, hear in whatever way they're interacting with your content? I think that is an incredible content, Nancy, and leads to our next bit of education or knowledge sharing, which is, do you need to prioritize an audience? We've had some great conversations in the prep work around this particular item. I am of the opinion, so I'll put a little star here. This is my opinion, that in fact, an audience needs to be prioritized. And I know that may be controversial. And it can look in many different ways. It can look like you are prioritizing a face-to-face audience. It can look like you are prioritizing a virtual audience. It can also look like the priority is both audiences. But I do think that there is an element. Now, the experience needs to be valuable for both audiences. Okay, and I want to earmark that. It must be valuable and worthwhile for both audiences. But when you get past your budgeting phase, and then you've gone into educating the client on the decisions and the decision points and how that impacts budget, and you've gone into now your goals and priorities, you helping your clients plan or your customers plan, and you helping communicate to your vendors what are the important parts, heavily depends on what takes some priority for those audiences. So for example, you could have, if your face-to-face audience is the priority and you have a very limited budget, you're likely not going to lift a large event platform for that virtual audience, right? Because you don't have the budget. And your client has communicated that of the 100 people, they believe that 90 will be in person, and they want to make those 90 people the priority. And the 10 people who can't attend in person, they want to still receive the training because the messaging and material is valuable, but they're not spending a lot of time and process on the collaboration between the two audiences or the communication between the two audiences, because they recognize that their experience that they are trying to create is heavily driven in an on-site face-to-face experience, right? And so knowing that from your client then helps you allocate those budgets.
Definitely. And I will just say two things. So hybrid is kind of where we are now, right? There's no just on site. At least I'll put a caveat to mine as well, right? At least from my point of view, I think hybrid is the way to go because, to your point, Meredith, you may have a smaller audience that's virtual, right? but it is still important for them to get that content and get that education. Whatever you're offering them is valuable, right? Certainly don't think that it's not. So, and the way of the world has sort of changed. Maybe people can't travel as easily as they could before. Maybe they don't feel comfortable. So I think at the very least, if you are able to still offer something in a virtual manner, definitely do so. It's also nice to kind of have it in your back pocket in case things were to change on site again, right? Things are ever changing every day. So I think that is great to call out in terms of, even though your budget may be smaller for virtual, and even though your audience may be smaller, it's definitely still good to do. The other thing that, just to kind of bring to light in discussion with your point that you brought up, our very own Joe Schwinger likes to say that he doesn't like our virtual audience to feel like second-class citizens, right? So when you're doing hybrid, again, think of what you are offering and what is most important, like the caption we saw from Nancy in here, right? So what is most important for you to deliver, and then how will you deliver that to both audiences, okay? So it's just really key to think through. Maybe you won't have networking and gamification and every bucket for both audiences, or maybe you will. It does depend on your budget for sure. And kind of, the options are endless in terms of how you do that. But it is just key to think of your main component with what you'll be offering, and how you're doing that for kind of both worlds.
Lauren, I think that's so great. So Miller Tanner Associates, where I work, we have a global workshop every summer that brings together our full team. And what was interesting, we of course paused in 2020, and we did a full virtual, just 4 hours. People were burnt out of screens. But in 2021, we did come together, and of course, understandably, our U.S. team was able to travel together, but our rest of world team wasn't able to come into the U.S., which was the location of this particular workshop. Mm-hmm. What we played around with, and what I encourage you all to do in this new hybrid landscape, is that there are a variety of ways to drive connection and to drive all of those elements that you're talking about in both high tech and low tech ways. So as an example, you can, when needed and have the budget, lift a platform like MeetingPlay and really have the full support and the tech that you need to have a very engaged and polished experience. This summer when we met, we played around with other ways in order to do it. Like, for example, for our global experience breakout, we played around with, well, what if we just used a Zoom and there was an iPhone that got passed around because we had key speakers, right? So there are lots of experimental ways that you can do this and look at it from all different budgeting perspectives. I also think that it's key to understand, when you're looking at the prioritization of your audiences, I think you need to have some decisions made around how much connection between that face-to-face and the virtual audience that you want. So some feedback that we received that was incredibly valuable, because we played around with different breakout styles. So some of the breakout styles we did where we mixed the face-to-face team with our virtual team and did breakouts. So on site, we would have small groups that got together that were face-to-face and then the virtual together in a breakout. And then for other breakouts, we did exclusively, when breakouts were happening, the face-to-face audience in a breakout, and exclusively the virtual teams in a breakout. Mm-hmm. And they're very different experiences. Yeah. Wondering if anyone in this event today has played with that and can share your experiences. I'll share for our team. They enjoyed the cross connection with the face-to-face audience, but then also sometimes felt it at a disadvantage. So while they liked that connection, there was a feeling of, oh, we're not there. And then sometimes when they were in their own virtual breakouts, they felt like they got a lot more accomplished because it was such a closed and confined space for them. But then they recognized they couldn't be a part of what was happening in the room. So in both scenarios, there were challenges. We recognized that depending on the types of materials we were presenting, we would adjust and choose those different types of breakout styles to match with the materials for the best possible experience.
Yes, I totally agree. I mean, it's great to have both audiences at some point mesh together, right? However you can have them merge. similar to what I was speaking of before with the chat and the questions or the Q&A, allowing both audiences to feed into the same spot, that gives them that sense of, the uniform group feeling that even though they're apart, they are still together. They're still consuming, they're still experiencing things together. Same thing with your example with the breakouts. We've done networking lounges where folks on site are able to be a part of a networking lounge that's happening for our virtual audience. So again, keeping those two groups together. Some areas might not be as easy or make the most sense to do a fully merged experience, right? But sometimes you want to still offer the same engagement or experience, even if it is separate. So for example, if you're going to have a night evening event and you have a photo booth there just for the fun, you can add a photo booth to your virtual platform, right? So maybe your audience is in there at the same time in the same booth, but they're still both able to have that fun type of experience that's added to the event in addition to, your agenda content and whatever else you're delivering. So just, do you want to offer it to both audiences? Do you want them to experience it together? Or do you just want to make sure that they're both experiencing that level of fun, basically?
Yeah, and they can be low tech as well, Lauren, that connects the audience. So we had a client that did in person and virtually bingo experience, company bingo, right? How many of these things happened to you this year? Yeah. And so it was mailed to the virtual attendees. It's cardboard stock, right? It's not expensive. It can be produced very, very inexpensively, mailed in USPS. This was a US only event, so that helped. Mm-hmm. And then that actually connected the audience with this low tech tactile, and you can have winners in person and winners virtually, mm-hmm. right? And to your point, there are so many creative ways in which you can connect those two audiences, and it doesn't always have to be tech driven either. Mm-hmm. It can be completely outside of that. I loved the comment that Brandy put in the chat, which was just curious, do most people prefer the term live, in person, or on site when referring to on property? And then I saw Ray commenting back as well. So we call it actually face-to-face to make it very literal. The live portion, your live is face-to-face. Sometimes we call it live, but often, and our virtual, we call screen-to-screen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then and we're working on the idea of face to screen, right? Then that's sort of like the hybrid of that. But to really try and drive home the point of what's being used. And it's curious to see what you all are using in your terminology as well.
I honestly use on-site and virtual personally, and it's what I hear a lot more of. But we're obviously all using different labels, so maybe that's something we need to work through as well, right? Just similar to understanding the different types of Zoom and just understanding what those mean, we might want to get a little bit more uniformed here in terms of what we're using just in the industry in general.
Yes, I think perhaps forming a committee to go out with a new glossary of terms for us all to be in agreement on. And I do want to just call out, because I'm seeing it in the chat as well, that every single thing that Lauren, you and I have just discussed have budget implications. Mm-hmm. In your use of breakouts, when you are, for example, and the example that I used at our workshop, when you are combining a face-to-face audience, so the live on-site audience or participants, with your virtual audience, there are considerations with regards to production. Mm-hmm. Is it even just as simple as a rental of a computer? But in order for the audio to be well heard by those that are in the virtual landscape, you may have to add mics, right? It totally depends on your configuration and volume of attendees. So it's an incredibly important thing to look at. Mm-hmm. Okay, I think we have talked exhaustively about goals, education, vocabulary, budget. Next up is timeline.
Yeah.
How much time do you really need? And then how much time would your client actually give you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think what I want to say, how much time do you really need? all the time in the world, right? But we would all love to have that, and we know that that is not the case, right? I think the big thing to think of here is you need to give yourself more time than you expect to need, right? And I understand that, you know, just in general and getting started, the timeline may be condensed more than you even want it to be. But just try and allow as much time as you can. Give yourself extra time, because hybrid, I think we had a comment earlier, it's almost like juggling 2 events into one, right? Because you may be delivering similar or the same content, but you may be doing it in a little bit of a different way for, you know, your on-site folks versus your virtual audience. So you just need to kind of keep that in mind, and then also take a step back with some of these platforms that we're talking through for the virtual audience. You know, you may be well vested in your on-site experience, and the hybrid component is going to be a little bit more heavy in the virtual world if you are not as used to that, right? So just take a step back and think of all that has to go into play. I like to kind of bucket it in 2 separate buckets. Once everything is aligned in terms of budget and goals, and you kind of have your path forward in terms of what you plan to create from an event perspective, then you get into the nitty-gritty of getting it executed, right? So your 2 buckets are going to be the vendors that you're working with, whether it is for virtual and or on-site, all of those components that are going to be involved. If it's, you know, any technology that needs to be custom developed based on your audience and your event and what you've set up to provide. But then also there's going to be that bucket for the client and the meeting planner and the folks that are actually getting the content together, getting the design together, because ultimately those 2 pieces need to go, you know, hand in hand, right? The design component for your virtual platform, for your signage on site, for your app if you're having that on site as well. So that's kind of like the step 1 in terms of getting that together. But then there's the content. And I'm talking about kind of content overall, right? Not even just your session content, but there may be components to both your platform and your on-site that you're not really used to, you know, consolidating, but within this hybrid world, it may be a little bit new to you. I highly recommend that you reach out to your vendor partners that are helping execute your event. Ask questions. It is not too early to ask questions ever, right? If they have examples, if they have templates, anything to make you a little bit more organized in your content delivery. And again, you know, prioritizing what you want to really focus on for your content. Maybe certain things are a little bit clean cut, dry, straightforward, and other things you want to really elaborate on. So kind of outlining all of that in your timeline will help. But I think definitely, you know, asking questions and getting templates and examples will help support keeping things moving, especially if you're on a tighter timeline. Because I don't know about you, Meredith, but you may think you have the time, and then next thing you know, you're right there at the end and you feel like you're juggling. And, you know, event professionals, we always pull it off. And personally, that is what I love about events, right? They are super fast and ever changing, and we're always moving. But just any way that you can kind of put the tools in your tool belt and really prepare, that's my recommendation.
Yes, absolutely. And I was laughing at, as we discussed this, Lauren and I were talking about, well, how do we share on timeline? Because it depends. Do you have is it a 50-person meeting? And you already know what the hotel is? Is it a 2,000-person hybrid experience? Well, those 2 events have incredibly different lifts and incredibly different timelines. And then sometimes you just lift things because they have to be lifted, right? So one of our hybrid events this fall, it was about 100-person event that we did in 9 days, right? That's all about client coaching and setting expectations, right? Okay, we can lift this event in 9 days. You will be able to prove nothing, essentially. You will have to trust us. We'll put things up. You'll be able to look at the final sort of platform features and what's going on. You'll be able to, you focus on your content. We'll focus on getting your audience there, getting the invites out, getting through the registration and travel process in the next 9 days, getting all the attendees there. But you're not going to be able to choose your breakfast menu or your lunch menu. We're just going to choose what is available at the hotel that they can execute quickly, easily, and wonderfully for the attendees in the next 9 days, right? Because their orders have already gone out for the month. So I think there is, when it comes to timeline, what I would suggest with regards to when you're moving into hybrid landscape, I think most people are very comfortable in their face-to-face timelines and or their virtual timelines, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I would suggest is taking the timelines that you're comfortable in. So let's say it's face-to-face, and because I think that's the one that most of the industry is the most comfortable with, is like really knowing what this event was pre-COVID and what it took to lift. I know the timeline on this event face-to-face. So take your face-to-face timeline. Let's say it was typically 6 months for the event that you're looking at. And then just start with an addition of 25%, 20 to 25% of extra timeline, or a team that's additionally dedicated that allows you to do it in the same timeline as your face-to-face event, but allows the income stream to have duplicative roles that are working on the two sort of channels at the same time, right? And different event organizations are approaching this in different ways, depending on the types of events you're doing and also the access to staff that you have.
Yeah, and we're seeing some comments here. You know, hybrid is really delivering 2 events in one. And then there was a reply to that. Definitely requires 2 teams working as one, right?
Absolutely. I see a comment here from Lewis. It certainly takes much longer time to do an event now, and that it makes it harder on us. I think that you need to look a year out, because the more organized you are, the better you can serve all. Yes, absolutely. The more organized you are, the better you can serve. And I think speaking to the timelines, budget, the goals, some of the things that we prioritization of the audience. But I'll share with you, in the industry that I work in primarily, 12 weeks is a long timeline. And a year would be unheard of for us in many of our events. So I think this does come back to, again, and Lauren, I'm sure you're seeing this, some of the client management in explaining to them, when you're in that goal setting, okay, you want to prioritize both your face-to-face and your virtual audience. Well, that means content for both and engagement opportunities for both. And so I often ask the question back of, do you have additional time as a client team? Or are we going to add additional service or team members on our side to help take some of that work off of you? And I think what I want to encourage us all in this time is to not go back to pre-2020 and say that those are the expectations of this time. The industry as a whole has come through a pandemic. We're offering a different service now than we used to. I actually think there's never been a more important time to be an event professional, to show the value of what it looks like to be on the operational side, Lauren, you know, for an event platform like MeetingPlay, to be on the operational side of an event experience firm like Miller Tanner. We bring something to the table in this time frame that I think couldn't be explained to clients before in as robust a way. You're nodding, so you've had experience with this as well.
I do agree, yes. And actually, Brandy brought up a really great point. Won't timelines all depend on your hybrid format, right? So if your virtual event is happening at the same time as your on-site, what you were just mentioning, Meredith, you need content for both then, right? And they're most likely going to be happening and being created at the same time. But then perhaps you have your on-site experience first, and then you offer a virtual, you know, after the fact. So you're able to prioritize in your timeline what content needs to be created and at what point when. Maybe that will help alleviate, so you're not doing essentially 2 events at once, but you kind of still are.
Exactly. And to the point in some of the chats that I'm seeing, and to what you just said, Lauren, listen, if you're just going to do a simple webinar, right? Day of, you're just opening up a webinar style for the virtual attendees to log in, and there's no additional engagement, that's probably not a lot of lift on your customer. And it's not a huge lift on your team either, right? That's something pretty simple to set up. But anything sort of past that becomes much more complicated. Even if you think about, okay, let's say it's not just audio and slides that we're broadcasting, right? Let's say that it's video. Well, when you're looking at producing from the live event, the face-to-face event, video feed out to the virtual audience, you have to make sure you have the adequate lighting, right? You have to make sure you have the right camera. And you have to make sure you have time to train your speakers. Because they have to present now, not just to the face-to-face audience, but also to that virtual audience. And they may need coaching on where to stand, how to stand. And if you have a static camera, one that doesn't move, then they have a very narrow, sort of space with which they can work. And a speaker that likes to move needs to be recoached and have time to rework even on site. What is their movement pattern for this particular presentation? And it's incredibly important to be able to do that and to be able to work through that complexity and prepare your customers for that complexity. Because what you don't want to do is invest the time and the money in a video feed. And really what your virtual audience is getting is a speck of someone on a stage, because the lighting and the camera aren't really adequate to pick up the animation, the voice, the physicality of that speaker. And so you've actually wasted money on a video feed if it's just simply a static shot from the back of the room that is too far away to read in any way for your virtual audience.
Yes, I totally agree. Denise actually just brought up a really great point though, Meredith, with us talking through, maybe the virtual component that's offered is just a stream, right? She said, I don't think we can go back to 2020, which I agree.
Yes.
Attendees' expectations are higher now, though, because of being inundated with so many events just purely virtual going through COVID, that, the content has to be of premium value, right? Because coming out of virtual now, that does kind of put hybrid in a little bit of a different level. So maybe we're having thoughts in the industry of that they can't offer just a stream. But again, that sort of relates to budget, so.
Budget and priority of audience. So I think we are going to see a major swing in the industry and overall, but if it's just training, sort of webinar style training, I don't think people will line up for a face-to-face experience in the same way anymore. In that they want to be, if it's truly just a learning outcome, they want to be able to digest it on their own. If there's no value, if the audience isn't impacting the material in some way, right? If it's truly just stand and deliver, I think that you won't see audiences lining up for that. What they will line up for face-to-face is engagement and reasons to be in person there. And then on the virtual side, to your point, Lauren and Denise, I think, yes, never more important that you have great video production, that you have a great partner in helping you lift your materials into a platform where it can be seen and digested in a way that looks clean, polished, professional, and is easily accessible to your attendees when they need it. I realize we have only like 11 minutes left with this amazing group. I've loved all the chats. It's so great to interact in this way, but I would love to do some more traditional Q&A, I think.
Perfect.
Hey, everyone. So yeah, it's been amazing to sit back and kind of see the chat going, but we do have some Q&As that came up that I'd love to spend some time on. I'm just going to go in order. So one of them is, please can you elaborate on how you did the combined breakout for face-to-face and virtual?
I think that's for me, and yes. So we tested about 6 different scenarios at our workshop because we're meeting professionals, and so everyone had a different idea. So I'll give you some of them. We had a workshop on core cultural values, and in that scenario, we just placed laptops at tables, and we had mini breakout rooms on the laptop where the virtual audience was brought into, and then they interacted at the table. That was very low tech, right? And because we were working at small workshop tables. Then I shared with you another breakout. They were departmental breakouts. Some of the departmental breakouts did just like as I just described in their smaller teams. The global experience team was doing a lot of self-reporting. And so the best video feed was actually making an iPhone the video camera for the breakout, and that was passed around as the attendee in our mini virtual breakout room, so that the person who was speaking to the virtual audience could be seen very close up and had control over how their image was conveyed. And then we did other breakouts that I shared where we did do workshopping, but we created just virtual breakout rooms for the virtual attendees. So they had no face-to-face interaction in those breakouts, so they just interacted with one another. I hope that answers that question. Those are three of the many ways we tested on site.
Awesome. This is another really good one. How do you set a true hybrid timeline versus the old days timeline? So maybe the 2020 timeline or before that?
Oh boy. Well, I think this kind of goes in line, Meredith, with what you were outlining before, right? Taking the timeline that you are used to, what you are familiar with executing in terms of at least the on-site component, and then adding at least, that 25% buffer to that to allow for, your other components that you're going to have. Of course, this does also align with how involved your virtual audience and platform is going to be as well, right? What features and functionality are you offering? How are you engaging them? Because you may need more time for that technology piece.
Exactly. Or the other option, which is to double and mirror a team that can work in parallel.
Yes.
Right, in some way. Because if you think about it, if you're doing a true full virtual where you may have video records and pre-records as a part of your face-to-face hybrid experience, you're going to want your content locked out 2 weeks out prior to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right, which is very different than how you would potentially lock some of your face-to-face content, right? Speakers have a little bit more flexibility getting in there. And that's why even at a bare minimum, I just say start with that 20 to 25%. You can always adjust, right? You can always adjust and say, okay, we're further along. We can ease up on some of this stuff as you get to know how, and also it's very client dependent. Some clients are very comfortable in this space and are making the transition easy, and others are not. Others are really struggling, and you're having to slow down your process throughout the time to continually educate and re-educate on the choices they're making. And that makes the planning timeline longer.
Yeah, that is very true. Very true. I think the education, honestly, the education component carries through the entire process, right? So it's a big piece that's kind of in the middle of the budget and the goals, but it also is a continuous component for sure.
Absolutely. I was telling Lauren and Lauren that I've shared with our team internally that since 2020, I've recognized that sort of we've been psychologists and therapists, and we've been educators, and we've been event professionals. All three were required to take our customers through this time. And I think for the foreseeable future, it will be the same.
Yeah, definitely. And another good kind of transition is, what are some of the most common questions that you hear during all of this?
Goodness. There's so many questions.
Honestly, I think Ray put it in the chat at one point, like, what is hybrid? Yeah. Like, what does that mean? Like, just the basics. Like, what does this word mean? I don't understand what this word means. When the customers are honestly brave enough and vulnerable enough, which that's the other thing we have to do, is make a space that allows that vulnerability and bravery of our customers. They come to us to be the experts and to help them with this. And so, signals and ways in which you can make your customers, even long-time customers, feel comfortable with even just saying, listen, you may not understand everything. Please stop me. Ask what the word means, because it will make your event so much better, and it will make our relationship better to work with, because I'll meet your expectations because you know the words to use to share them.
Mm-hmm. I think probably another, just again, broad question that's received is, here's my budget, here's my goal, right? Here's what I want to deliver. How do I do that? Right? Because they might not even understand some of the features and functionality, like I was talking through in terms of Q&A, or maybe, combined networking lounges. There's a variety of opportunity here, but they might not even know where to start. So, again, engaging in just all of those questions and engaging in your vendor partners to help kind of carry through how you can do that, how it can be achieved. I mean, I think that's probably question number one is, okay, here's what I have. Help me, right? How do I achieve this hybrid that I'm trying to do? Because it's new to me.
Yeah. And someone else asked, Brandy asked, what are some good examples of how that's worked? That you kind of go through that process, you've given the advice, and what are some good, actual real life examples of different levels of hybrid, and how you've kind of gone through the process with them.
I can speak to a little bit, Meredith, while you're thinking through some things. So in terms of, if networking is a big piece, right? If you know your audience and you don't want them to feel like they're missing out on any of that, just in terms of what has happened since COVID, just being all virtual, right? And you kind of have this Zoom fatigue, and you want to kind of enlighten and bring your audiences together. If you are able to offer your on-site audience the ability to connect with your virtual audience in kind of like those breakouts that you were talking through, Meredith, or networking lounges like we have done, where you have stations set up on site so they can sit there and kind of network and discuss there. And then virtually, we have kind of a render to make it look like as they are on site, and they can join in that as well. I think that is, super helpful. So you're taking that goal and you're hearing the client say, networking is big to us, right? We certainly want to deliver our content, but we also want to make sure that the folks that are in attendance get to communicate with each other and get to network and brainstorm and kind of share their experience of absorbing our content and how they're going to apply it to their jobs, right? So you're allowing them to do that networking component. So I would say that maybe is a question with a goal there. How we were able to achieve that. Another component, I'm a big person about just engagement in general, right? So if you think back to college days, you don't want to just be in a lecture hall, similar to what we did today, Meredith. We want to be engaging, right? We want there to be a chat. You just don't want to be spoken to. So the ability for you to pull your audience in terms of discussing and asking questions all together, whether they're virtual or on site, they're able to connect with each other. I know that was a big component in an event that we had done as well. So we heard that goal and we applied it, and we had, great audience response there in terms of thanking us for offering that, thanking them for, the on-site audience and the virtual audience to be able to connect with each other. They were thrilled, right? And they no longer thought that they were sitting just at home by themselves. They could fully engage in that. So we're able to hear that and apply it in multiple different ways. So I think it really relates to what is that main goal and purpose. And then, there is an unlimited amount to how we can apply that and achieve that.
Great. I saw a couple of chats, and I want to just give one quick shout out in this Q&A to all the solo planners out there. Because I know there are lots of solo planners that are consultants, or you have your own small event company and it's you and then whoever you can hire in to help on an event. And what I want to say and what I want to inspire us all in this time period is we should be sharing with each other. We should be connecting with each other. Don't hold your ideas so close that you aren't helping other people. And what I mean by that is that I can have an idea for an awards dinner and I execute it in one way. I can give you that same idea and I guarantee you will execute it in a different way. And it doesn't take away from my original idea, and it doesn't take away from my business to share my ideas with you, right? We as an events community should be sharing. So Alan, I saw something that it's like, and from a few people, like the fatigue of coming up with the next way to engage, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Just say, hey, do you have 15 minutes? I want to spitball an idea. Great, I'll hop on with you. Let's talk about what you're trying to achieve. We do it internally with our teams all the time. And I recognize that not everyone in the industry has a team to do that with. So rely on your colleagues, rely on your network, make me a part of your network, make Lauren a part of your network. We're all better together. We're all stronger together. And it's our job as professionals to elevate the industry during this time, to elevate to the next level, and we all benefit when each of us is successful. So don't be afraid to reach out. Let's hop on the phone for 15 minutes, Alan. We'll come up with your next great engaging idea.
I think that's a really great way to end everything, Meredith. That was great.
It's to be flooded.
I know, I love it. No, that was wonderful. Yeah, this has been a phenomenal session. Thank you both so much for covering this topic. Just from a standpoint of learning, I think this engagement from the session has been great. I know we weren't able to get to all of the Q&A, so we'll keep them on here. We also have our hallway chatter that's opening up now, where a couple of MeetingPlay Plus Eventry reps will be on there to answer any additional hybrid questions that you have. But we'll see you the same time next week for our next session, our second in the hybrid masterclass series. We also have some downloadable content available in our downloadable content section of our virtual platform. So be sure to head over there and download that. And then in addition, if you have any socials or things that you're posting about the session, please feel free to use the hashtag MPA University, and we'll interact with you as well. But of course, like Meredith said, please feel free to add our awesome speakers on LinkedIn and network and continue to grow this awesome conversation that came from today's session. All right. Well, thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much. This was a blast.
Amazing. Bye, everyone.
Bye.